tonight's webinar is going to be about quite a few different energies. Some energies you will know, some energies you won't know. So, Celtic mythology. It's funny because tomorrow is my daughter's naming day. And so I have spent today finishing off writing, channeling the ceremony. And also I have been getting some images and some other bits and pieces for the naming day tomorrow. So one thing that I went for is obviously that some Irish feeling around it, because her name is Aoife, which for those of you who know how difficult some of the Irish pronunciation is, because obviously it's not pronounced like English, it's not the same language. I don't know why people find that so confusing. It's the name, my daughter's name is Aoife, A-O-I-F-E, Aoife. So she is, that name has not got anything to do with Eva, by the way. It's not from Eve, it's not from Ava, it's not any of that. It's a proper Celtic, Irish, Gaelic name. And the reason why I chose that for her is because it's a name that I'd always loved for years and years. And I knew that I had to name her before she was born because I was really ill. And I knew that she needed a strong name because she was going to be early and I wasn't necessarily going to be with her. I was not, quite honestly, I was really going to be there full stop. So I just knew that I had to call her Aoife. So Aoife is the name of an Irish warrior goddess who appears in the mythology. She comes from the same stories, the Maymale, the Magmale, that the Tuatha De Danann and the Irish people, the tribe of Dana being the Irish origin goddess, come from. So what I'll do is I'll give you a bit of background. So the Tuatha De Danann, the tribe of Dana was the goddess who gave the people of Ireland back their land. So the story goes that there were interlopers who came and tried to sweep away the Irish from Ireland, and they were set to the seas, they were scattered to the seven winds, and they were broken and lost. And the goddess Dana is said to have found them, brought them back together, brought them back to their land, and given them their land back. And actually, they're said to have lived with the interlopers, they're said to have lived with the people who came to conquer them. And there's various stories which come after that in terms of the mythology. But Dana was the goddess who brought them back, and she then produces all of the goddesses and gods from which the whole of Irish history mythology comes from. So one of the children she has is one called Eru, or Éire. Obviously, those of you who know that Ireland is also called Éire. Ire, land, air, land. So she had Éire, so she literally gave birth to Ireland. She resides in the other realms, and in the Irish mythology, these lands are called the Maymale, the Magmale, depending on how Englishy you read the phonetics on it. But it is the other side, and the other side is accessed via the mist. When the mist comes in, that's the gateway, the easiest gateway through to the other side. And in the other side is a whole host of beings who come from and spring forth from Dana. So one of them is the Banshee, but there's obviously sprites and fairies and leprechauns and a whole host of beings who reside in the other world. And the mythology states that the Tuatha De Danann, the tribe of Dana, in the end, they are pretty much wiped out. They go back to the Maymale, back to the Magmale with Dana, to be with Dana, is the story. And when I was looking through for some images for tomorrow for my daughter's naming day, I came across a really amazing artist who I can't believe I haven't delved into that much. My background's art history. So there is this, if I can get it, it's mirrored for me. I don't know if you can see it. So this is an image by John Duncan, and this particular image, I'm just going to get the name of it for you, is the image of them going back. So this is the riders of the, and it's spelled S-I-D-H-E, but the Sai, okay, the Sieve. It's them going back into, these riders going back into the Maymare. Okay, so the original people of Ireland became sprites and beings themselves. And my dad does a lot of reading of ancient British history. And the Picts came over from Europe. And when they came over, they said that the only thing on these islands, remembering how close Ireland and Britain are despite some of the dreadful history that we have, is that there was only little people and fairies, and that's all that inhabited these islands. There was no humans. So these islands are really, really magical. Our islands are the most mystical and magical, in my opinion, probably in the whole world. I think we're very, very lucky to live here. And even though a lot of it was wiped out, and a lot of our mythology was wiped out with the Romans and with Christianity, we still hold on to much of it. And Ireland was luckier in respect that the Romans never got over that far. They didn't really get into the West Country very well. They kind of got a bit into Wales. But when I was doing some research with regard to the Irish stories and some of the Welsh stories, there's some massive similarities, absolutely massive similarities between the two stories. So my son is called Dylan, and he is Dylan of the Waves. So Dylan of the Waves is said to have been born to Lugh. Lugh is spelt two different ways in the Irish and the Welsh mythology. But for me, they represent the same figure. They are both the Lord of Light. They are both, Dylan's the brother of the Lord of Light. And there was this warrior god who was said to have come and settled on the sea in between walls, and used to lay his feet on this beautiful virgin in the sea. Now, for me, that's probably a siren or a nymph, one of the sea creatures, one of the sea sprites, the sea beings. And somebody came and had their wicked way with her, and she fell pregnant. And when he returned from war, he found this out, and he married her. And she had two children that were born from eggs. And one was the Lord of Light, who was Lugh, and the other one was Dylan of the Waves. Now, he sometimes gets referred to the Lord of Darkness, but the problem with some of our Christian take on, which a lot of it is, and darkness, is that it's evil and it's bad. But actually, the dark was a place of reflection. The dark was a place of the deep sea. And for the Celts, the sea is very much associated with death, as you can imagine, probably many people lost at sea. But equally, it's the access way to the underworld, which is why it had that. And Dylan is said to have been killed by an evil uncle. And there's we all know lots of mythology where there's evil uncles. And the seas are still said to cry for him. So Dylan of the Waves, and I've got Aoife, who was one of the other goddesses. Now, Aoife is one of two sisters, and they were both warriors. They were both warrior. And there is a character called Cuchulainn. And Aoife, and this is one of John Duncan's images of Aoife, she was said to have been a great warrior, and she fought Cuchulainn. And he's a mythological figure, a man, kind of like a Herculean type figure, and she fought him, and she nearly won. She'd shattered his sword, and he managed to basically threaten her horses. And she loved her animals, and she loved her horses so much that she was distracted long enough for him to defeat her and capture her. And he actually brought her back to his home. His wife, his first wife, bore him no sons, and demanded that as punishment she bore him a son, which she did. So she bore him children. One of them was a son, and he, by a twist of fate, accidentally killed his son. So she also had. So there's another image, but this is to do with. I understand the girls. There's two sisters, two warrior goddess sisters. See, it's mirrored. It's very confusing. There. And Aoife. This is Aoife. And she's said to have turned her children. This is another story of Aoife. Turned her children into swans. So imagine being a goddess warrior. There's almost that Athena energy. If anyone is into the Greek mythology, there's a very strong Athena energy to Aoife, and she's been trapped, been forced to produce children, and something happens. She gets very annoyed and she turns them into swans, so that he can never have a child to rule in his place. So they're the children of Lear, and that's supposed to be another myth associated with Aoife. So she's generally got a really bad rap, Aoife, but to be honest, if you annoyed me, I might do something quite desperate as well. If I was, as a woman, I don't know if I would have survived in Britain in the 50s or the 40s. I think that probably would have been too much for me. So actually, you know what? If she did some desperate things to try to get out of her situation, I completely understand it. So the Irish mythology all stems back from Dana and from the tribe of Dana. So if you ever hear any of this, you know, if you ever hear about the tribe of Dana, and you might well have heard of the singer Dana. Dana is the origin goddess. She's the goddess from which all of Ireland springs. So she's a really wonderful goddess. Now John Duncan is a Scottish artist. He's a Scottish artist. So he didn't just draw Irish mythology, but he's very much drawn to Celtic and Greek mythology, which I love. If you're going to go for the ancient world, go for Greece rather than Rome. It's more authentic. The Romans base a lot of their stuff, just changing a few names, on the Greek. So go for the Greek. And if you're into any of the Celtic mythology, it's well worth looking back and looking at our own myths and our own legends, which we've forgotten. And Dylan, being Dylan, if anyone has met my 6-year-old, told the hairdresser all about how he used to be Dylan of the Waves. Like you do, you have a conversation about your previous lives where you were a god. And he told her all about how he used to be in the waves, and he died and the waves still cry for him. Now, she was Polish. His hairdresser was Polish, and she said to one of the girls, "Oh, do you know this story?" And the girl looked at both of us like we were a bit stupid, like, what story? What is this story? Because we don't know our own history. And it's a massive, it's not just a shame, it's a crime. It feels like a crime to me that these beautiful ancient stories aren't passed on enough, and they're not there in the way that they should do. It's a complete travesty, in all honesty. So the more that you can read and learn and understand about some of our mythology, the better. So what I'm doing is giving you an overview of what I've learned, and the gods and goddesses really resonate with me. So the other image that I've got, which is another John Duncan, seriously, like, Google him, he's amazing, is this one, and this is Breed, and he's Bridget. He basically spells in the Scottish Gaelic the B-R-I-D-E, so Breed. Now this is the coming of spring. This is Breed with the coming of spring. So this is her in her maiden form. Okay, so many of us would have heard of Bridget. She is the overarching archetypal goddess, which runs through a huge amount of not just Celtic mythology, but through into the Christianity. And there's some conjecture, there's some argument that actually that Saint Bridget in the Christianity was never this nun and this monk, this nun who started up a convent and all of that sort of like. and many believe that that story was created because they knew that they had to bring a Bridget through, because she was such a strong character. She was so widely worshipped by the Celts, and the Roman Catholic Church knew that they had to have a version of that within the church to bring people along. So Bridget, Breed, you'll see there's lots of different spellings, lots of different pronunciations, and they're all correct and they're all true. She comes through, and you sometimes hear her referred to as Bridget of the Wells, and there are lots of springs all over the country dedicated to her. Now, she is the archetypal goddess, so you will find that she comes through in lots of different ways. And for me, she very much is a roll-up of many, many different goddesses. So we would have known at some point the goddess of every river, the goddess of every field or hill or whatever. And our history in this country, in these countries, in these islands, is very similar to the Japanese way, which is the Japanese would have had a protector and a guardian, a spirit, a dragon in most cases, of every hill. If everyone's seen Spirited Away, I would highly recommend it. It's a great cartoon to watch. Your kids will watch it, you'll get an education, and it's a deeply spiritual film. And it's about, it's totally about this topic. So they absolutely believe in the same way that our ancient ancestors believed in every river and every mountain having a goddess or a god associated with it. And they were quite often associated with the tribes and the tribal leaders, and they would each work with these goddesses because it was the local goddess who looked after their river, who looked after their hill. And I'm just going to have to try and look up, I can't remember off the top of my head, the name of the local, to me, of the River Itchen, the goddess of the River Itchen. She is still recognised. So I'm just going to go, I know that I've got it somewhere on my laptop. So I heard a story of her, and I was trying to look it up now, 2 ticks. She basically appeared to somebody I knew, not I knew, but I knew down the pub. So I was talking to this lady down the pub, like you do, and it came up, why don't you, oh, you'll love this story. I mean, this was years ago. This was absolutely years ago. She said, you'll love this. My husband has met the local Celtic goddess. And I was like, no. And he said, yeah. So basically, he was down night fishing with a friend. And they'd been up and they'd been catching. And it got to a certain point, and basically, he had this woman appear from out of the bushes. Sounds dodgy as hell, doesn't it? So this woman, bless her, appears from out of the bushes and simply says to them, you will catch no more fish tonight, going home. And they said, what do you mean we'll catch no more fish? They may well have been having a beer. What do you mean catch no more fish? She said, you're done for the night, go home, you will catch no more fish. And anyway, she turned around and walked off. And the gents became really concerned about her because she was by herself in the middle of the night, and it was a very quiet towpath. It was a very quiet section of the river. There wasn't anywhere really that somebody could have easily walked down or got off the car park, which is why they'd gone for it. It was a nice quiet spot where they could fish undisturbed. So they decided to go and look for her, and they used their torches, etc., and they couldn't find her. I think they were worried about falling in the water and what she, all of that type of stuff. And they could never find her. They couldn't find her. So I can't find my workbook now. She's got in there. So basically, they went and they told their story. They told their story of this woman who they'd found down near them, down by the edge of the Itchen. And lots of the older fishermen and the local fishermen said, yeah, you met the goddess, you met the goddess, and I can't find my work now, but you met the goddess. And obviously they all thought it was a load of rubbish and were laughing. But the story is, and he's convinced, it only makes sense to him that that's exactly who she was. Really ordinary guy. You can imagine some guy out night fishing with his mate, really, really ordinary, down to earth guy. who isn't into any of this stuff, but he absolutely believes it. Him and his friend believes it as well, saw the goddess of the River Itchen that night. She told them to go home, and they listened and they went home. So you know, she'd probably had enough of them. Ancast, thank you, Claire. She had, and that says Ancaster. Claire's popped it on the comments. She'd had enough of them and told them to go home. And these lads are absolutely convinced that it was the goddess. And there are lots of stories. If you speak to local fishermen, that was my first-hand story from somebody, but there are lots and lots of stories of her appearing to people. Particularly if when I spoke earlier about the May Male, the Mag Male, and the mist, and people walking out of the mist, it's where the air is thin. And if you've got areas along a towpath where it's very quiet and you're full of nature, the air is going to be thin. The access ways and between the planes are going to be so much closer. So have you got a higher chance of physically seeing spirit? Yes, you absolutely have. So she, Ancaster, absolutely, you know, gave them the kick, yeah, up the butt that they needed. So that's my story about the local Celtic goddess. So if some, I know a lot of you watching probably are quite local, she's your local goddess. She's the one that you need to thank in the spring for seeds starting to grow, and thank in the summer for a beautiful summer which will make the harvest grow, and thank her in autumn for your wonderful harvest, and thank her in winter for a wonderful year, and for giving you the opportunity to now reflect on the past year and to set your seeds and sow your seeds for the year to come. So she's, if you're looking for somebody local to yourself, then absolutely. We have lost so many of the names of our gods and our goddesses, particularly the goddesses, because they're very much associated with the earth, with fertility and the abundance that comes from the earth. And, you know, why wouldn't you be grateful? Why wouldn't you be thankful to the planet for giving you your food, for giving you your crops? It makes absolutely perfect sense. So there's many goddesses who you're not going to know her name. You may not know the name of the local goddess, and it may not matter what research you do, her name may well be lost. However, if you're looking for somebody who to work with, my suggestion would be to call on Bridget, because she will step into the place. If she's got somebody else to bring through with her, she will do, but she's kind of like this goddess which you'll find there's so many stories attributed to her, because she is this wonderful, you know, she's a wonderful energy to work with. So if you're looking for something local, that's who I'd suggest and what I'd suggest. So there are many stories associated with Bridget. She's amazing. So the other thing that I would like to talk to you about isn't just the goddesses that are associated with the mythology, but I would also like to talk to you about Banshee energy. So this is, oh, the kids have been at this. This is, gosh, my image that I've had done by a really lovely girl called Tassia, and she's an artist, and she channels work, and this is one piece that she's channeled. So the Banshee, so that image is very different to what we normally associate with a Banshee. Good reason for that, because what we normally associate with the Banshee is completely incorrect. She is not some screaming witch of a woman. She can be if she needs to be, but she's of the May Male, she's Ordana, she's a sprite, she's a fairy type figure, but almost like an elf. If you think about the elves in Lords of the Rings, for example, you're looking at that type of a being, that type of an energy. She's amazing to work with. She works with empaths. So she generally works with women, because traditionally women are seen as the gender who are able to tap into their emotions more strongly and tap into their gifts more strongly, because we work with energy and we work with emotions. Energy is emotion, so women are more naturally energetic workers because of that. However, if you are a man who is emotionally adaptable, emotionally secure, and you're certainly, if you're empathic and you feel other people's emotions, she will absolutely be working with you as well. She is here to help empower empaths and to step into their energy and to step into the power and the sensitivity of that they hold. And she's here to help heal us. So when somebody passed, she would absolutely step forward to help with the communal grieving, And there's something which is associated with the Irish grief process, which is called keening, and it's to do with wailing. And as years went on, it very much became associated with the lower classes, because of course the English in Ireland would want to make, and they did make, a lot of the Irish ways either seem inappropriate or seem that wasn't the thing to do, because they kind of knew that the only way to keep the Irish under control was to try to remove what made them Irish. So there's a lot of habits like keening which would have been frowned on and was purposefully kind of misguided. The Banshee again would have been part of this. If anyone knows anything about the Irish and the English when we're in charge of Ireland, a lot of the language was not allowed to be spoken. They weren't allowed to play Gaelic games such as the hurling, which is the most scary, thrilling, dangerous game I've ever seen. It's like a cross between lacrosse and hockey, and none of the lads have any teeth left to play it. They were getting smacked in the face. Gaelic football, any of that was all banned. So there's a lot of traditional Irish ways which ended up with a bad reputation, and that was kind of intentional. That was kind of to pull the Irish out of who they were supposed to be. So the Banshee fell into that. So the Banshee herself, and the keening was always very important, the crying and the wailing. If anyone ever watches international news, and they'll see when there's been a tragedy in an area, we'll see that there's been a tragedy, and the locals very much cry. You might see them openly crying. It's very English thing to do, to go, oh God, making a bit of a fuss. No, actually, it's a really important release, because they're releasing not just for them, they're releasing for others within the community who are grieving deeply. And that quite often, especially when it's a tragedy and you've got children, or you've got mother, or you've got a father to young children, somebody passing in tragic circumstances, that crying and that communal crying is even more important. And the Banshee connects into that. She generally connects into deep sorrow, which we would call grief, generally associated with the loss of a person. And she's associated with loss. She's also associated with anger. What she enables us to do is to, in fact, find our tongue, and through love, but to find our tongue. So sometimes we do need to clip around the ear. Sometimes we do need to hear the truth. And it's actually not kind to sometimes allow people to continue not understanding why they've got themselves into a situation, why they keep on going through cyclical times. And for the Banshee, she speaks from a place of love, which is, I love you, so I'm going to have to tell you this because you're behaving like an arsehole again. Or you're in a situation again because you keep doing the same thing over and over. So that the Banshee will help you find your words when you need them. It doesn't mean to say she's argumentative. She can be if she needs to be. The white hair of the Banshee is a very true aspect of her. So they would often say women would channel the Banshee when they were arguing, and you can see why, because she would take no bones about it. If she'd made her mind up, she would argue it through. And the Irish have got a way with being able to argue, certainly in my family, and it's okay. It's actually okay to say your piece. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to shout and scream sometimes. And actually, shouting is a very primal way of releasing anger. And the reason is because as animals, if you became under threat, making yourself as big and as loud as you can was a really good early defense mechanism. So it's a very natural way for us to work. And when we bind it down, and when we don't work with our anger, when we ignore it, and when we're used to completely putting a cap on it, it ends up being, horrendous. So she teaches us, rather than allowing the anger to build up, to say what we need to say when we need to say it. And I think for empaths, that's particularly important, because you sometimes think, I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings if I tell them the truth, or if I say no, or if I don't want to help them out. You're not. You've got to look after yourself as well as others, because if you serve yourself, you will serve others. If you serve others, you will serve yourself. It's a beautiful combination. So the Banshee helps us find our words. She helps us with a whole host of issues around anger as well. She also ties us into the community and is taking joy from the community. So there's lots of empaths out there and lots of sensitive people, and people in general think, do you know what, I'm getting really embittered about society. I really don't like society. And she helps us release the anger and release the bitterness that's within us and heal in order for us to find joy within the community. That doesn't mean that you have to go to in my case, it'd be every mummy club that comes up. It means that you actually find your tribe, your Tuatha, yeah? Your Tuatha De Danann, your tribe, your soul tribe, the group of people, and they might be blood relatives and they might not be, who are your tribe, who you come from and who your soul belongs to. And these, we used to call them soul groups, but tribes is a much better way of determining it now, because we are internationally and globally connected, that we will have people who will come in and ebb out and move on in a way that wouldn't have happened years ago. So we have more people within our soul group connecting into us. So that's really, really important. It's important to find joy within the community in some way. It doesn't mean you have to be sat with people all the time. You know, you will get to a point where you've done enough peopling, and that's all good. Yeah, when you've had enough people for the day, go home, make a cup of tea, and put your feet up. So it's important that you have your time as an empath, and also seek joy in the community, because those bonds that tie us together. You know about grounding. We all know about grounding. That when we ground in, the earth forms a current with us, and physically and emotionally and energetically completely recharges us. We do that to each other. When we find joy in each other's auras, we absolutely tie in. There's some chakras which have come back into existence at the side, which for a long time have only been associated with animals, where our chakras need to tie into each other. They need to bond. And it's those chakras that a mother bonds to her child with, and a father bonds to the child with, when that's allowed to happen easily and naturally. Which is a really wonderful process. And it's something that actually in my own family I've seen change. Going back to my youngest daughter, one of the greatest blessings was actually me being in ICU for 24 hours, because I couldn't hold the baby. You can't hold the baby when you're out of it. So my husband held the baby. My husband sat with her and just laid her on him. And also because I was so ill generally, he had to be more hands-on. I'd fed the others myself. This wasn't happening with this little one. And he was more hands-on, and she would sleep on his chest, and a lot of the stuff that he really hadn't had the opportunity to do with the others. And she was so small that you know, that newborn period where they're just these little tiny dots and you can just carry them around and they can sleep on you like baby monkeys for so long. We had that in a much longer way with her because she was born so early. She would just cry for no reason other than she was alone, and it was heartbreaking for her. And in those moments she would sleep on us. So absolutely, it's when that process is allowed to happen in a natural way, which has been bred out of men for generations, and it did, the relationship changes. So he's bonded with her in a very different way, and it's beautiful to see. It's helped him, and it's helped his relationship with others generally as well, and that bonding with others and being more open to others. So what the Banshee does is she really heavily helps with that, and the Banshee comes through. I very much resonate with the Banshee energy. I've been working with her for years in terms of passing on souls. It didn't click, first of all, who she was when she was coming in. This white woman, who's this white woman? She's coming again, and it clicked that it was the Banshee, because obviously the Banshee in mythology is this wizened old scary old hag, and she's not. She's this really beautiful, amazing energy. So so you can tell that I'm channeling because I talk quite quickly, so apologies if you have trouble keeping up with me jumping from topic to topic. So she also worked for me very heavily last year. I nearly died. I definitely had an OBE, out of body experience. So I know that I was very close to passing. So she was working with me anyway, as I was working through anger related stuff throughout my pregnancy, and on the other side of it, she was absolutely there, probably shoving me back into my body when I came round. So, and she also would have worked with my husband at that same time in terms of helping with that bonding. In fact, she probably would have helped facilitate on some level that whole situation where I was so ill, because it drew others close and I had to ask for help, which I'm not very good at doing. And, you know, people can't help unless you ask them to. But what it really showed me is that the people that stepped forward and helped, they were my soul tribe, they were my soul group. And it proved to me a lot of the work that I've been doing in terms of friendship, in terms of attracting other people who were good friends for me, absolutely worked. So she's a really wonderful energy that has been with me for some time, and particularly over the last 18 months has just been off the scale in terms of helping me with my healing and helping me with my life path. And all of that type of thing. She's amazing. So okay, so I don't know how many of you are lagging this whole, you know, thing with the lives and lagging on the lives. So if anyone's got any questions, please do ask, because I'm kind of like finishing up a little bit at the moment. So yeah, Claire was there. In fact, a mutual friend of ours said to me the other day on Aoife's birthday, "Happy Not Dying Day." Yes, Happy Not Dying Day. Woohoo! It's always good. It's always good when you don't die, because, you know, I've decided I'm not coming back again. However, I do want to make the most of this life, and that's very much the Banshee energy, which is, you know, taking joy from the community, loving every minute of it, saying what you need to say, and healing and feeling whether it's painful, and feeling whether it's physically painful or emotionally painful, as alongside the joy. You cannot have the joy without the pain. Those two things exist together in this beautiful dichotomy. And these mirrors exist throughout the universe, and it's what keeps the balance. Pain and pleasure, and joy and sadness, those things really do tune into each other. So she very much helps with that. So yeah, I don't know, I like feeling emotions. Sometimes I like having a bit of a dramatic moment when I just sit there, cry my eyes out for no reason. Normally, you know, from some video on Facebook, those wonderful videos that inspire your heart, and you sit there blubbering for 5 minutes. I enjoy those. So is there anyone else who would like to ask some questions or has anything else that they'd like to add? Please pop a comment up, because I am pretty much trying to wrap things up now. If you're watching this back through on replay and you pop a question up and I don't get to answer it, if it's a quick one, I'll type in an answer. If it's not, then I'll just say that's going to take me about 20 minutes to type out. So it's, if you do watch this on the catch up, and I'll be popping this on YouTube as well. So if you do watch on the catch up and you've got extra questions, it's a quick one, I'll absolutely try and help you out with it. If it's not, and it's something that's going to take me too long, I will say to you. The other thing that I would love to hear is if you have any thoughts about other topics you'd like for me to do, because what I'd really like to do is to kind of, if you've got no thoughts about topics by the end of this, I will set a topic for next month, for the second Friday of the month. So, okay, I haven't really got any questions asked. So, topics for next month, obviously we've done the Celtic, goddesses, mythology, all of that type of thing in with today. The what I could do next month, maybe some ancestral healing, maybe something about ancestral healing, if anyone would like that. Oh, bless you, thank you, Stella. I'm really glad you're able to join me. So if anyone's interested in ancestral healing and what that means, in why you do it, all of that stuff, I can absolutely let you know about that. So I've also got the Divine Service on the first Sunday of the month. So obviously we've done this month's one. We're looking at August now for the first Sunday of the month, the Divine Service. Divine Service is reading, philosophy, and some psychic readings. I connect into your guides. I don't. I'm not going to bring through mediumship. It gets too messy, and sometimes the wires get crossed on the internet. a bit like tuning into the wrong radio station. I end up with having lots of different family members for the wrong people and all that fun stuff. Okay, so Claire saying yes to ancestral healing. Okay, brilliant. Right, so what I'll do is I'll see you next month for ancestral healing. I'll put some reminders up beforehand, so hopefully you'll see it anyway. But I hope you've really enjoyed tonight. Please keep up to date with the Facebook page or Instagram if you like any of my bits and pieces. And I would say, I probably should try and plug my book. I've just launched a book, and if you have a look through, it's about the Banshee and about the whole healing process. So I talk about all of the myths, and I just go all the myths about the Banshee. I talk about my own experiences with her, and I have some really wonderful, it's a really wonderful self-help mind, body and soul book about how she will help facilitate your healing in terms of your anger release. If you find that you're angry for no reason, if you find that you're bitter for no reason, and if you find that maybe you find yourself, there's maybe some simmering, bubbling away going on underneath the surface, or some grief and loss, and you're in depression and deep sorrow and that type of thing, you know, bipolar, those types of very emotional, depressive, she will help with that because you've got something that you need to release. And the book's full of some really wonderful exercises, and I've really enjoyed writing it. So the book is available on Amazon.